The morning she said it, the rain had been falling for hours. Not dramatic, not the kind of storm you remember, just a steady, persistent drizzle that made the world feel hushed. I was standing in the kitchen, barefoot on the cool tile floor, waiting for the kettle to finish. She came down the stairs in silence, sat across from me, and said, without looking up, "I think I want to feel free for a while." There was no anger in her voice. No apology either. Just that soft finality people use when they've already rehearsed something 100 times in their mind. Her name is Callista, a name as light and floating as she always wanted to be. For nearly a decade, we'd built a quiet life on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. A house with wide windows, shelves full of mismatched books, a garden that she tended while humming songs without lyrics. We had dinner by candlelight more often than not out of romance, but because we both liked the warmth of the flicker better than the glare of the overhead bulbs. We weren't broken. At least, I didn't think we were. Sure, things had grown quieter between us, but I thought that was the rhythm of time. People settle into comfort. The wild love becomes a softer sort of partnership, doesn't it? That's what I believed. I thought she did too. I asked her what she meant by free. She traced her finger along the rim of her mug before finally whispering, "I don't know. Just not tied to anyone. Not right now." The rain outside tapped against the glass like it was listening. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just stood there, kettle now shrieking behind me, and watched the steam rise until I couldn't see her face clearly anymore. She left 2 days later. Not with fury or suitcases thrown into a car, just a soft departure. A few bags. A short note. A whisper of perfume left in the closet where her dresses used to hang. She said she wasn't running from me, just toward herself. I told her I understood, even though I didn't. Not then. What followed was strange. The quiet I used to enjoy became unbearable. I kept cooking dinner for 2 out of habit. I kept buying her favorite tea. I told people she was visiting her sister when they asked. Truth is, I didn't know where she'd gone. She stopped answering my messages after the 3rd week. And yet, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was still somewhere between confusion and hope. The first night I realized she wasn't coming back, I sat outside on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders and tried to remember the exact moment she stopped loving me. I couldn't find it. There was no betrayal, no name spoken in secret, no sudden shift in routine. It was just as if she'd slowly floated upward, and I, without even noticing, had loosened the string. But this story isn't about her leaving. Not really. It's about what happened after. About the quiet strength I didn't know I had. About the unexpected way life began to shape itself in her absence. About what she said when she finally came back and saw what I had become. The day after she left, I sat on the edge of our bed for what must have been 2 hours, still not fully understanding that the indent in the mattress beside me wouldn't refill. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just watched the sunlight crawl across the wooden floor like it was looking for something too, maybe the version of us that used to dance there barefoot on Saturday mornings. Callista and I weren't loud people. Even our love had been quiet, more glances than grand gestures, more steady comfort than cinematic passion. But the silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It was something else. Something heavier. I went to the grocery store later that afternoon. Muscle memory is strange. I found myself grabbing her yogurt, her mint toothpaste, even the lemon soap she used to keep by the sink. I only realized what I was doing when I got to the checkout and saw the clerk bagging a life that no longer existed. I paid anyway, threw it all in the trunk, drove home in silence. When I got back, I left the bags in the car and just stood in the driveway, staring at the front door like it didn't belong to me anymore. It was the first time I felt like a guest in my own life. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that she just needed a break. Space. That's the word she used. But deep down, I knew better. People don't pack up and leave homes that feel like home. They don't need to search for themselves unless they've already begun to imagine their life without you in it. In the weeks that followed, I started doing something strange. I stopped trying to fix things. The leaky faucet stayed leaky. The porch light that flickered? Still flickering. Her books, which once filled the built-in shelves with color and clutter, stayed exactly where she left them, a kind of museum to the life we shared. At first, it was because I couldn't bear to touch any of it. Later, it became something else, a quiet refusal to pretend. I didn't tell my family the truth. My sister called and asked when Callista and I were visiting again. I told her we were busy. A coworker asked how she was. I said, "She's good." It was easier than explaining that I didn't know where my wife was, or why she didn't want to be my wife anymore. Oddly enough, I started remembering things from years earlier, things that never seemed important until now. Like the time we drove through Kansas during a road trip, and she cried watching the sun dip under the fields. I asked her what was wrong, and she said, "Nothing. That's the problem." Or the way she'd flinch whenever I used the word routine, as if it was a threat. I used to think she loved the simplicity we built. Now I wonder if it was suffocating her all along. A few people tried to set me up. Casual suggestions, lighthearted nudges. "You need a fresh start," they'd say. "You're still young." But there was something hollow about the idea of starting over while the echoes of your last goodbye still lived in every corner of your house. Besides, I didn't want to replace her. I just wanted to understand her. I wanted to know how you go from falling asleep beside someone every night to choosing a world where they no longer exist. And yet, something in me had already begun to shift. Slowly, quietly. The grief stopped feeling like drowning and started to feel like drifting. I began to read again, books I picked, not ones she'd left on the table. I went for walks after dinner, not because I was chasing peace, but because the evening air no longer felt like it was pressing in on me. I wasn't healing, exactly, but I was changing. And not for her, for me. And that's what she didn't expect. Because 3 months later, when I finally stopped checking my phone, when I no longer noticed the empty half of the bed, when I began waking up and actually looking forward to the day, that's when she returned. Not with flowers. Not with tears. Just a message. Simple. Plain. But full of all the words she never said before. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, reading it over and over, like it might change if I blinked. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel anger, or longing, or even satisfaction. I just felt still, because I wasn't the man she left anymore. I didn't answer right away. Her message sat there on my phone like a postcard from a country I'd already left. "Can we talk?" Those 3 words, so small, so polite, so late. I stared at them for an hour without moving. The kettle boiled. The dog barked. The mail slipped through the front slot and thudded against the floor. But I stayed still, phone in hand, thumb hovering, not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time in months, I didn't feel anything that needed to be said. I didn't block her. I didn't reply either. I just left it. And that choice, that moment of absolute stillness, said more than any response ever could. The next morning, I did something simple. I rearranged the living room. Not just moved a few cushions. I pulled the couch from under the window, flipped the rug, took her favorite chair, the one she'd insisted we buy from that artisan place in Asheville, and dragged it out to the curb. A couple walking their golden retriever asked if it was free. I nodded. They thanked me. The dog wagged its tail. Just like that, it was gone. That night, I slept on the opposite side of the bed, the one she used to claim. Not out of spite. Not even symbolically. I just wanted to see how it felt. It was like stepping into an old theater where a different life had once played out, a stage left behind by 2 actors who'd long since exited. By the 4th day, she texted again. Longer this time. I missed the way we used to talk. I know I said I needed space, but I don't know if that space helped me find anything. It just made everything feel emptier. I don't know what I was expecting, but I didn't expect it to hurt like this. She ended it with, "Please don't shut me out. Just talk to me." I placed the phone screen down and left the house. I didn't take the car. I walked. Past the bakery where she used to buy her favorite bread. Past the dog park where she once said she'd take up photography. The air smelled like freshly cut grass in late spring, and somewhere along the way, I noticed something that caught me off guard. I was breathing easier. A week passed. I never responded. She called once. I didn't pick up. Not because I was punishing her. I didn't feel vengeful. Just done. There's a strange clarity that arrives when you realize someone left thinking you'd collapse without them. When they picture you frozen in place, arms stretched toward a door they locked behind them, and instead, you're standing somewhere else entirely, not even glancing back. I began doing things I hadn't done in years. I started baking again, something I'd loved before we met, but somehow let go of, bit by bit. I painted the guest room, not because it needed it, but because I wanted a different shade of blue, a calm one. I spent a whole afternoon putting together a playlist of music I used to love, songs that had nothing to do with her, that belonged to my world before ours ever collided. Some nights, I'd still think about her, not with longing, but with curiosity. What does it feel like to walk away from something steady, thinking there's something brighter out there, only to find it's just wind and echoes? I don't know what she discovered during her time being free. Maybe someone else. Maybe no one. Maybe just a mirror she didn't want to look into. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Cream paper. Her handwriting. Neat. Wide loops, like she always used when she was nervous. It started with, Thayer, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. I didn't open it. I didn't throw it away either. I just placed it in a drawer, not because I was holding on to hope, but because I'd already released her long before she realized she wanted to be held again. And that was the thing she never saw coming. You want to know what's strange? It wasn't the silence that felt unfamiliar. It was the absence of watching over someone else's emotional weather. I didn't realize until she left how much of my time had been spent reading the temperature of her moods. Watching the way she stirred her tea, listening to the speed of her steps on the stairs, trying to guess from her voice whether she needed space or closeness that day. I used to call it love. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just quiet survival, trying to hold on to something that had already started slipping the way water does through cupped hands. It's funny how often people ask, did she cheat? Like they need a villain to root against. No, she didn't. She didn't scream. Didn't slam doors. She just faded. And fading is so much harder to explain. No one shows up to console you for that. No one starts a fire in your honor when the love dies of cold instead of heat. I think that's the part that haunts me the most. How long I kept showing up to something that was no longer being hosted. It's been 2 months now. I've stopped counting the days. Not out of strength, out of irrelevance. It no longer matters how long it's been since she said, I need something different. That sentence used to replay in my head at night, echoing off every wall like a smoke alarm I couldn't shut off. Now it's just part of the noise of life, like distant traffic or wind through trees. Last week, I took a road trip. Alone. No playlist. No destination. Just the soft hum of tires and a trunk filled with things I used to put off. A folded-up easel. A journal I'd never written in. A dusty camera I bought 5 years ago but never learned to use. I stopped by a lake whose name I never knew and stayed until the sky dimmed into shades of rust and violet. I didn't check my phone once. I didn't think of her at all. That night, I stayed in a roadside inn with flickering neon and no working Wi-Fi. The walls were thin and the bedsheets were scratchy and clean. There was a note on the nightstand in marker, written by some guest long before me. You are not what left you. I don't know why it hit me so hard. Maybe because I'd started to believe that I was just an echo of the moment she said she was done. Maybe I needed someone, even a stranger with a marker and bad handwriting, to remind me otherwise. When I got back, there were 2 new letters in the mail. One from her, one from her mother. I opened neither. I poured myself a glass of water, stood by the window, and watched the rain begin again, soft and steady. But this time, it didn't feel like grief. It felt like washing something away. It's not that I don't care anymore. It's that I no longer feel responsible for the parts of her that broke. Some things you don't fix. You outgrow. The house sounds different when you're not listening for footsteps. The wood creaks more slowly. The wind outside feels gentler. Even the fridge hum seems lower, as if the whole place has relaxed with me. There's a coat hanging behind the door, one she left. I moved it once, then moved it back. Not because I wanted it there. Not because I missed her. I just didn't care enough to decide. And that, I think, is where peace begins. When even the objects tied to her no longer demand a reaction. This morning I stood in front of the mirror and watched myself brush my teeth. Not quickly, not as part of some routine. I just stood there and looked at my own eyes like they belonged to someone I hadn't seen in years. He looked older than I remembered, but calmer too. I made breakfast slowly. 1 egg. 1 slice of toast. I didn't check my phone. I didn't play music. I just cracked the shell, watched it sizzle, and let the silence do what it wanted. There was a time I'd fill every empty moment with noise, a podcast, a playlist, a weather app. Now I let things echo. I used to wonder where she went when she needed freedom. Did she go back to someone from before me? Did she walk along beaches pretending she was in a novel? Did she sit in coffee shops and write in the journal she never let me read? I don't wonder anymore. But today, something strange happened. I opened a drawer in the kitchen and found an envelope. Not new, not delivered. It had my name on it, written in lowercase letters with no punctuation. I hadn't seen it before. Inside, a single photo. Not of us. Not of her. A photo of a street lamp in winter. Snow falling. Empty street. No note. For a while, I didn't know what to do with it. Then I just leaned it against the window and left it there. The same way people leave flowers on graves. I didn't need to know why she sent it. I understood anyway. Sometimes people leave without ever walking out the door. And sometimes they come back without ever being invited. But me? I had already stepped outside. And I wasn't waiting anymore. You ever notice how a room feels different after a long absence, even if nothing's changed? Same furniture, same shadows on the wall, same coffee mug on the table with that faint ring on the rim. But when you step back inside, it all feels unfamiliar, like someone rearranged the air while you were gone. That's how it felt when I walked into myself again. I didn't mark the day it happened. No journal entry, no epiphany under a sunset. Just a quiet shift, like waking up and realizing your body aches less than it did yesterday. And for the first time in a while, you're not bracing for pain when you move. The truth is, I stopped asking if she'd come back. Not because I knew she wouldn't, but because it stopped matching. The version of her I loved. The girl who danced barefoot in the kitchen while a record played something scratchy and slow. She wasn't coming back either way. That version of her is trapped in a moment. Like a fly in amber. Beautiful, still, and no longer real. But here's the part no one warns you about. Sometimes healing feels like betrayal. There's a guilt to feeling okay when you're not supposed to. You catch yourself laughing at a movie or humming in the car, and suddenly there's this shadow over it, whispering, "Shouldn't you still be broken?" No, not anymore. I went to the farmer's market last weekend. Bought peaches that were too ripe. Talked to the vendor about nothing. The weather, the traffic, the way the wind kept flipping his sign. When I walked back to my truck, I passed a couple sitting on a bench. They were arguing quietly, the way people do when they still care, but can't remember why they're hurting each other. For a second, I thought of her. How we used to fight in whispers too. Not to avoid disturbing the neighbors, but because we knew yelling would make it real. As long as we kept it quiet, we could pretend it wasn't breaking. That's what love looks like, sometimes. A soft war no one admits is happening. I don't miss that. I miss the sound of her zipping her coat while rushing out the door. I miss how she read out loud from books she didn't like, just to mock them. I miss the very beginning of us, the part where we thought the future would bend around us like we were made of light. But I don't want her back. I want the man I was to stop apologizing for being left. There's a photo on the fridge of me holding a sparkler in some friend's backyard, years ago. She took it. You can't see her in the picture, but you can feel her there. You can feel the trust, the shared understanding that someone is looking at you through a lens and seeing something worth capturing. I kept the photo, not for her, for me, to remember that even in the middle of it all, I was still glowing. I didn't close the door. I just stopped holding it open with my foot, hoping she'd walk back through it. There's a corner of my garage that still smells like her shampoo. I found one of her old scarves tucked behind a toolbox last week, dusty and barely holding its scent, but I knew it immediately. Lavender. Not real lavender. The chemical kind they sell in boutique bottles with elegant fonts and impossible names. I stood there for a long time, holding that strip of fabric like it might give me an answer to a question I wasn't sure I'd asked. I didn't cry. That stopped weeks ago. But I felt something else. A small, patient ache. Not sharp. Dull. Familiar. Like a bruise I press just to remind myself it's still there. I didn't throw the scarf away. I didn't keep it either. I placed it on the garage shelf like it was visiting, not staying. She sent another message last night. Her fifth. This one wasn't dramatic. No, please, or I miss us, or let me explain. Just 5 words. I understand if you can't. I read it twice. I felt nothing. Then I felt guilty for feeling nothing. Then I got angry for feeling guilty. That cycle used to spin all day, every day, but now it just flickers once and moves on like a power surge, not an outage. You know what no one prepares you for? The reality that you might not want revenge, that you might not want her pain, or her regret, or even her apology. You might just want your own name back. And I do. I want my name without the weight of being the one she left. I want to walk into a room and not feel like there's a shadow behind me explaining why I'm alone. I want silence that's mine, not silence that's echoing something she broke. I saw a couple dancing in a park this afternoon. No music. Just them, barefoot on the grass, swaying in a way that didn't follow any rhythm I recognized. But they looked free. Not perfect. Not polished. Just free. And I smiled, not because I missed dancing with her, but because I didn't. I didn't envy them. I didn't ache for that feeling. I respected it. And that told me something. Forgiveness isn't saying, it's okay. It's saying, you don't owe me anything anymore. It's taking the pieces of yourself they left behind, brushing them off, and saying, I'll use these for something else now. It's telling the memory to sit down and be quiet, not because it doesn't matter, but because it's already said enough. I don't hate her. I don't need her. And I don't need to know if she understands what she lost. That part, that responsibility, left with her. And I'm not going to carry it back. The sun came through the kitchen window this morning at an angle I hadn't seen in months. I stood there, pouring coffee, and it caught the steam in a way that made the whole room glow. It wasn't a big moment, no grand realization, no tears. Just a small shift in air, a subtle piece that landed on my shoulders without asking. I realized then, I was done carrying her absence like it was something I needed to honor. The weight of it, her leaving, the silence, the letters, the strange photo, the questions I stopped asking, all of it had quietly dissolved into something softer, like dust settling after a storm. And in its place was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Room. Space, not for her return, but for my own beginning. I spent most of the afternoon outside. No headphones. No distractions. Just the breeze brushing through the trees and the sound of my neighbor's wind chimes doing their best to find a tune. I pruned a few branches. Planted new herbs in the garden bed she never liked. Basil, thyme, and a little rosemary. I don't even cook with them that often. I just liked the smell. It felt like a small promise to the future. A few friends came by in the evening, not out of concern, not to check in, just to hang out. We grilled. We talked about absolutely nothing. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like the guy they were still tiptoeing around. I laughed without effort, told stories without filtering them for sadness. I was present, not surviving, just being. When they left, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder if she'd messaged again. I didn't care. Instead, I sat outside, alone, under a sky that had finally cleared. No clouds, no haze, just stars, quiet and countless. I leaned back in the chair, arms behind my head, and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It didn't carry grief with it, just stillness. She once told me she wanted to be free. She said it like it was something I'd taken from her. But here's the truth, the one I hadn't been ready to say until now. I'm free too, not because she left, but because I finally stopped waiting for the life we were supposed to have, and chose the one I could build, fully, without her. It's not dramatic, not loud, just good, quietly, deeply, unexpectedly good. And that is more than enough.